So how did men's development hurt men more than anything else? And this is like a huge theme that goes on in my book, but I want to point it out in divorce and custody. And coming from a perspective where, one, I have had one of the worst and tragic stories with divorce and custody, but then I came back to beat it. And in addition to that, this is what I also do for a living. I help people with men's problems, one of those being divorce and custody, and I teach my guys to win. Doesn't happen all the time, but man, we have a very good record. And if you come to my groups, it's more than 50% of the guys are in a position of complete power with divorce and custody. When you look at men's development, when you look at all the megaphone of men out there, you hear this huge conflict of how unfair the courts are. And I'm sitting there thinking, men, you know how the courts are unfair. You know how people get screwed. There's all of you communicating about this. And is there a way to win? Is there? Because if there is, I'm going to find it. And I did. What is happening, guys? So first off and foremost, if you're watching this and you are going through a divorce and custody situation, you have to get in my groups. It's just not a point where I'm going to suggest it. Like if you want to do better with your case, find a right attorney, learn how to switch attorneys, learn how to argue in the courts, speak the language of the courts, avoid protective orders, not get protective orders set. If you do get a protective order set, how you can, man, be a good father and parent in the long run. All that sort of stuff, but it's so vitally important. Do not get screwed. Do not be ill-prepared. What I'm asking you for payment is very little, and it will save you tens of thousands of dollars, and it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in time with your kids. It's just that black and white. It's that black and white. Okay, that being said, what I want to talk about in this is that I've said for years, I've been critical of things like the red pill or men's rights activism, and at the same time, like, I am the guy that has done all this when it comes to kind of everything that they talk about. All of the struggles of men, all of what men call toxic or are being called toxic for. I have lived that beyond what many of the people in that community have done. And what's interesting is I've also done what almost nobody in that community has done is I have found a way to manage that, get over it, deal with it, whatever the situation is. A lot of people like to say beat it or dominated it, but with some things, you know, like if you get to things like addiction or depression or whatever, you manage those things. You don't beat them, you manage them. And when it comes to divorce and custody, dominated, straight up dominated. So one of the reasons why I think this is so bad for guys to listen to is it gives men a false solution. And although it's addressing problems, it's addressing, I've lived them. I can't emphasize that enough. You can bitch at me all you want about man's struggle in the modern world, but I have lived it hard. And I've coached men for 17 years on getting out of that, and I know an answer. So when I hear people complaining about something and they get caught up in a megaphone of complaining and saying women suck, the courts suck, we can't do anything, I got screwed by the courts. Dude, I got screwed by the courts. I got a felony by the courts that was admitted to be a mistake. 8 years later, I served that full sentence. I got screwed. It goes on everything that I do to apply for that I had a felony for child abuse. It's fucking crazy, right? So when that happens, what did I do with it? I have every reason you guys have to complain about why the system sucks. All I care about is beating it and living a good life and getting the guys in my groups to do so. And that's what we do. So in order for me to win my case, when it came to divorce and custody, I had to stop complaining about the system and I had to start being smart about the system. I had to know that I needed to know all the lawyers. In fact, in my situation, I came to know many lawyers that were in Travis County and interviewed them and talked to them, whether it was about divorce, business, whatever. And I really got to understand who was good and who was not. And when it came down for my divorce and custody case, I knew the lawyers to get. I knew the lawyers to talk to and the lawyer who would defend me. Now, I was nervous. I didn't know how things would go. I was scared for a lot of stuff. But we dominated, and why we dominated was not because we got involved in men's rights and complaining and all the bitching and complaining and that sort of stuff. We figured out a strategy of how to win it and made some predictions, and they worked better than we actually thought. But when you come down to the mental struggle of it, of confidence of men in this modern world and getting their alphaness back or whatever stuff, I've never been a part of that. Now, you also got to realize that I didn't get started in men's development until I was 28. That's when I started teaching in it. And I kind of fell into that job. In the book that I'm writing, I talk a lot about that, but it's kind of crazy. And At this point, it's just what I do. It's been 17 years. I do it well, and I do it a lot. But in that whole thing, I never expected that to be a job or even cared about it up until 28 when it started happening. Before that, here was my life. I lived as an addict. I lived on the streets. I got in a lot of fights. I had crazy experiences while traveling, living out of a car all over the US and Mexico. I did some badass stuff. Now in being a badass, whatever that means, I also lost fights. I got my ass kicked. I was afraid for my life. I got harmed in huge ways. I got damaged in tons of ways. And so what I know from living that alpha lifestyle when you're out fighting and sex and whatever crazy shit, and you're doing that, it's not always fun. It's not cool. Like everybody always talks about it. And I'll even say this, there's very few people that I respect in men's development in all of its categories because they haven't done that. But if you have done that, I totally respect you, even if I disagree with your philosophy, because you're not lying. So much of men's development is lying to men, to a society of men who are disempowered and weak and hurt and damaged or whatever you want to call it. And they're giving you a fake answer of what it means to be good. And those guys have never lived it. In that whole lifestyle of dominance, power, all this sort of crap or whatever we talk about, if that person isn't talking about the reality of what it is like to hold true excellence in your life and put it on paper, of to know what it's like to be a man that is dominant with women, and there's a consequence to that. There's roughness of that. There's hard. It's a difficult thing. If you're not sharing about that whole story, then you're probably full of shit. And the other thing too is that if you don't realize at some point that there's a solution in this, that I think it's healthy to seek excellence, to be competitive, to be the best at whatever you're doing. But if you're not giving a map of what that really is and having people really achieving that, you are failing. Now, here's one of the biggest ruses of our society and culture when it comes to men's development. We have a culture that says getting sex, money, power is key. That's what's going to make you happy. And it's not going to make you happy. It might be something that could be good or a highlight of your life and all that sort of stuff. But what's going to make you happy, and the reason why so many men are attracted to sex, money, power, is confidence. It is you being clear, is you knowing you having integrity, you knowing your word, you having the power of masculinity, of what that is in this modern world, which means to live a good life, to live a life that has power, you empowerment, that thing from you broadcasting to the world, and it has worth and it has a value. In who you are is what you say you are, and what you say you are is who you are. I don't see men doing that when it comes to money, sex, power, or work, or job, or family, or whatever. I see them living a false image of what they think is going to make them happy and is supposed to look good and be the answer for their pain. I think when it comes to my job, there's so many different things that I teach and work with men on, but when it comes to divorce and custody, this is what the red pill gave men. This is what men's rights gave men. Nothing to help them with their legal battle ever, and to be a good father and to win custody of their kids, something that I do over and over again with guys, nothing of that. Let alone help them with the mental struggles of it, of getting out of victimhood and being a survivor. And what that means is that, yeah, the courts may have screwed me, and that happens, that I can be a victim, but I'm going to survive. I'm going to be a good father, and I'm going to break this cycle, and I am going to teach my kids a good way of life. This is not what I show them doing. I see them building a distraction and saying, because the courts suck, I can be this. Because I got screwed over by women, I can have this perspective. No, you can't. As a man, as somebody who is a leader, is somebody historically, through modern history, the last 10,000 years or so, masculinity has carried this torch that they all share about, is this amazing light and leadership and whatever, building, yada, yada, yada. And you don't do that? You lead through victimhood. You lead through being angry. You lead without an excuse. Yeah, man, you get angry. I have anger that does not go away, but that's not an excuse for me to be immature and weak. I have anger of horrific, terrible things that have happened, and I hear them from other men. I work with men and hold the line for these other guys that go through tremendous amounts of pain. But here's what I think about male leadership, is it means you walk into that world and you walk in with pride. That means you don't get to ignore the pain in you. You don't need to wear an image. You don't need to have a false front. You need to carry that pain. And through that, find your leadership, find your goodness, find your virtue, find your clarity. When you can do that, that's the masculinity that I like. And I do not hear that. I do not hear that. As a man who has lived that, I do not hear that from those groups. I get it. There's some guys out there. I'm friends with some of them, all that sort of stuff. But man, I honor being a man, being a father, leading men. I've done it for 17 years. People have put their lives in my hands. And I do not screw that up. That's how important it is for me. It's not an image. Shouldn't be for you. If you want to hear somebody tell you to man up, well, look, man, I am a man who's walked it. Man the fuck up. Well, if you liked any of that, join my groups and get in a community that actually works it. I've done it for a long time, since 2009. And I don't know if anything out there in the world exists like it.